project is nearly here. It is race week in the Arizona desert. The Gold Wave, featuring elite age group athletes, takes place on Saturday. The pros are going to line up on Sunday. Welcome in to the final pre-race episode of Inside the Marathon Project. I'm your host, Steve Sievert. I have really been looking forward to this episode because we're bringing in a couple of voices to help us get race ready for this weekend. Rory Linkletter is making a return appearance on Inside the Marathon Project. We had Rory back on episode 3, and he was also in the field for the Marathon Project version 1.0 back in 2020. He dropped a 2:12:54 performance there to help ignite his marathon career. And also joining the conversation today is FloTrack creator and commentator, and let's say a marathon veteran in his own right, Johnny Pace. Gentlemen, welcome to Inside the Marathon Project.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, what a treat. This is it's 5 years in the making, man. I can't wait for this weekend.
Exactly. 5 years in the making, indeed. And we're going to go pretty deep on both the men's and the women's field. But first, I want to hear a little bit more about what's been going on with you guys lately. And Johnny, I want to start with you. I've enjoyed catching up with you and Nia and Demetria on the Meetup podcast. And they put you guys to work at FloTrack because just earlier this month, you're coming off the running event in San Antonio, and that seemed like 3 days of wall-to-wall content creation and coverage. My question for you, what's harder, recovering from the running event in San Antonio or a marathon?
Well, that's a fair question. You know, this year, the running event, one of my favorite, one of the best events of the year. It's an opportunity. We're often on the road covering, athletics and competition, and this is an opportunity for the running industry that surrounds that to be in one place. And it's really a celebration and an opportunity to connect, reconnect, and then take a glimpse into what's to come down the line as far as products, initiatives, and you name it. And it's always such a delight. I would say typically a marathon would be the more taxing endeavor, but there was something new this year. There was a mechanical shoe at the closeout party. So somebody, they had crafted basically a mechanical bowl in the shape of a running shoe. And when I tell you I was sore for about 4 days, that's not an exaggeration. Used muscles that I definitely had not trained before. So I was definitely a lot more sore than my most recent marathon in Chicago. So I'm going to say TRE actually.
All right. Yeah, you're not training those muscles on a 10-mile tempo, for example. Oh, man. Well, appreciate you jumping in and chatting a little bit about the Marathon Project. And I want to start with you on this question. What do you think makes the Marathon Project unique and how it's trying to carve out a niche on the U.S. marathon scene?
Well, there's so many reasons. And I remember 5 years ago when it launched, how much I took notice of that as well, because I think what people will say, and Rory certainly would know even better than I would, but that conditions and race environment over a distance like 26.2 miles, it's all about the variables. It's about those rises and falls. It's about your fueling. And when I saw that an event like this that was coming to optimize pure performance, I knew that was something special. And I'm so happy that it's back. I think a lot of times, you can train and prepare, but there's very rarely, if ever, most of the variables controlled for. And so when you can bring together a group like the Marathon Project has into one race, make it official and sanctioned, and really allow these athletes to push their further limits without saying, well, what if this wasn't a variable? That's what we're going to find out. That's what we have. And it really is something special. And I know, Rory, haven't participated, and you can certainly speak to it as well. Like, what a unique opportunity this is.
And Rory, when you and I were chatting back several weeks ago on episode number 3, you had mentioned you had planned to be in Chandler this weekend to support some athletes that you coach, also support one of your sponsors, Blank's Sports Nutrition, which is the personal bottles program sponsor for the race as well. But you were pretty clear. You said, no way I'm going to be on the starting line, because that would be marathon number 4 this year. And your coach, John Green, he was going to draw a bright line there. Turns out you're going to be on the starting line anyway. And tell the audience why and how that came to pass.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to be there. Obviously, like I said, I'm planning on coming down to Chandler to, be a part of the weekend. I love Marathon Weekend. I was actually just this past weekend in Sacramento for CIM for similar reasons. Just kind of wanted to be a part of a big weekend where I have a lot of people that I care about competing, and I don't get to be like a true enjoyer of Marathon Weekend all the time, because when you're performing at a high level, high leverage situation where lots on the line, it can kind of be clouded away from that like true celebration that the weekend can be. And Marathon Weekends are really, really fun, and I'm just way too performance oriented to enjoy it all the time. So yeah, I was going to be there anyways. And I messaged Ben a couple weeks back and was like asking him which ways I could get involved, because I was just like itching to do something. And I asked him about pacing, and turns out they were kind of still looking for a good pacer for the 208 group, so the lead men. And I was like, I could probably do that. That'd be a good workout for me. I do regularly like do long tempos at like marathon-ish effort, and I'll be getting ready for my own competitions in the new year. And what better way to take advantage of a trip down to lower altitude on a fast course than to rip it with some of the fast guys that'll be towing the line in Chandler. So yeah, I just kind of got myself roped in, but I thought it was a good opportunity, and so I'll be there helping people run fast.
You're going to get the train rolling, no doubt. How far do you anticipate going at that 208 finishing clip?
Yeah, I really don't know. So in Sacramento, I paced the OTQ group for 20 miles. Obviously, a lot slower of a pace than 208. It was like 214 high pace is what we were on when I stepped off. But I mean, I could envision a world where I go similar distance, maybe 30K, maybe 20 miles. I kind of want to see how I feel, and also see like who's in tow and what I can do to help. It's kind of like one of those things. It's like balancing the what's best for me and what's best for this field behind me. So we'll see. We have Bia Simbasa and Aaron Benenfeld, one of my training partners. Both those guys are actually my training partners. Bia a little less so than Aaron these days, but yeah, we're going to have 3 guys working together. So there will be a lot of sharing of the work, which hopefully helps us go deeper into the race.
Take us inside the pacing work that you did at CIM. Is there any chatter that's going on as you're leading the guys out? Are you checking in with them to say, hey, how are you feeling? Anything like that is going on as you're leading the group out?
Yeah, so I've paced a number of marathons. I've paced the Ottawa Marathon. I've paced Chicago twice. And now this CIM experience. And this one was very unique because the group I was pacing was so large. The CIM is just massive when it comes to that OTQ group. And so really, I felt like I had to hold those guys back. We were still too fast. And it was because me and CJ Albertson, who were sharing the pace work, were getting like stepped on, and people were just antsy. So I did a lot of talking and like kind of trying to calm people down and be like, hey, we're going to get you there on pace. Turn off your brains, tuck in. But, easier said than done, especially when you have a group that large. I think Marathon Project will be better because those guys that are going after that 208 time do know, like if you're going out for a time like that, you know what it takes, and it's going to be a conservation of effort, and it'll be a much smaller group with a much more pointed focus on getting to the later stages of the race with their time goals in sight and with the overall win in sight.
I see. And in CJ, he's just an animal. If I saw the finish correctly, he went all the way. Didn't he lead the group in all the way to the finish line?
Yeah. And my coach did not allow me to make that decision, but CJ said he'd go anywhere from 13 to the finish, and he went to the finish. So he had a large range of possibilities. And he had said at, I think, mile 14 that was the longest run he had been on since Chicago. So he hadn't run more than 14 miles in the last 2 months, and he went 26.2 at 5:08 pace.
Yeah, what's another 12 miles at 5:08 pace? Exactly. All right, guys, before we go deep into this year's field, I do want to share with our audience just a little bit of a rewind to 2020, because as we've already talked about a little bit, and Johnny, you alluded to this, such a special day in such a unique time, moving through and trying to figure out how to navigate a global pandemic. And obviously, there were a lot of restrictions on the race because of that. Both the men's and women's fields were capped at 50, primarily a U.S. base field because of travel restrictions. But those restrictions didn't dampen the performances that were produced that day. I mean, on the women's side, we were on American record watch for much of the race as Sarah Hall took aim at Dina Castor's longstanding American record of 2:19.36. She ended up finishing in 2:20.32, which at the time was the fastest ever run by an American woman on U.S. soil. And then on the guys' side, Marty Haher brought 7 U.S. men home in under 2:10. That's the first time that had ever happened in a marathon. And oh, by the way, hasn't happened since. So a special, special day on the roads around the Wild Horse Pass in Chandler 5 years ago. Fast forward to this week, and the fields are vastly different. The circumstances are vastly different. You've got 100 runners, more or less, on both sides. The men's race sold out months ago, everyone eager to get that Olympic qualifying time. So when we look at these fields and kind of take a look at the top seeds, and that's where I want to start, the top seeds in each of the men's and women's field stand out, and for different reasons. On the men's side, you have a guy who just might be, probably is, one of the most decorated U.S. men at the middle distances. You have Paul Chelimo, who is a 2-time Olympic medalist. He's a world champion medalist. Those medals at the 5,000 meter distance, he took a crack at the marathon with a lot of buzz, by the way, associated with that debut, which happened at the Olympic Trials Marathon last year. Didn't go well, didn't go according to plan. Of course, he dropped out a little over 12K. And then later in the year, produced his first marathon finish at a lower key event in Spain where he ran 2:18 and some change. Guys, I'll throw it open to the both of you, kind of open-ended question. What can we expect from Paul Chelimo as he lines up at the starting line on Sunday?
I think as we've watched Paul over the last couple of years at World Championship, or contending for these spots on Team USA, that you can never discount that championship pedigree, that knowing what it takes to compete and rise to the occasion. And he's taken swings at all sorts of large opportunities, and has always been in the mix. And I think that is a valuable and critical component, especially for this marathon, is having that winning pedigree and that championship pedigree, regardless of the distance. Being a competitor, I think, is that sort of intangible thing that training can't always replicate. And so I'm really eager to see what he can do. And I think the marathon's not an easy event to ace your first 1 or 2 attempts. And I have a good feeling that this could be his big breakout moment.
We hadn't seen him in a while, and he popped up at the U.S. Cross-Country Championships earlier this month. I believe finished 8th overall, so just a couple of spots away from making the team. Anything that we can take away from that performance that you think might translate to this weekend?
I would say that he looked good. He looked confident. He looked fit. Cross-country is very different than a marathon, especially when you compare the conditions that Portland had. But fitness is fitness, and it's good to see him competing like he was going to make that team. That means his training has at least been in a good enough spot that he feels confident to go out there and, do battle with some of the best in the country. And that was a really strong field. I was impressed with him. And, Paul Chelimo at the peak of his powers has always run with a lot of confidence and ferocity. Like, I remember distinctly, gosh, I don't know what year it was, but the US championships were in Sacramento, and he took it out and gapped the field and ran like a 13:08 by himself, winning by like 100 meters, never got touched. And that just goes to show when he's fit, he's confident and he goes for it. And I think he was confident enough to go for it in the US Cross Country Championships. But, there was a lot of really good guys there, and he fell gracefully short. And the marathon, if he's been training for it properly, is one of those that is going to make it really hard to do what he did in cross country. So I think he's at least in good shape, and his talent is undeniable. And I would assume he's going to feel really good for a really long time, tucked in behind our pace group and trying to run a really fast marathon.
Is there anything to be said, opening this up to both of you, about matching a runner and his or her strength to the course? And specifically this course, obviously 6 loops, no elevation change whatsoever. This is a course that lends itself well to obviously not just running fast, but to a rhythm runner, right? It's essentially this large track. Does that play to Paul's advantage at all?
I would
I would
certainly
assume
think
so. Go ahead.
Oh, I mean, yeah. I mean, you said it out loud. It's like he's built a career of tucking in on the track, and the way that this race is set up with these large loops. I think this is exactly the type of race that Paul's going to thrive in. So, absolutely.
Yeah,
Rory,
I would just add to that, you know, the trials is one thing. You know, the objective is clear, top 3, or doesn't really mean that much. You know, for some people, especially someone like Paul Chelimo, that's definitely all he was thinking about is like, oh, can I make the marathon Olympic team? So I think when that race was clearly not going in that direction, it probably changed his mindset quickly. And then I don't know what happened to him in Spain, but you know, with this race, there's nobody on paper with more talent than him. He's going to know that. He's going to be confident, and the course is definitely going to keep him in the fight for a long time. And I remember when I ran this course, that the loops do help, I think, keep you aware of where you are. Sometimes, you know, you run a marathon and distance becomes this abstract thing other than the markers on the course. You just kind of lose track of where you are. And on a looped course, I do find it mentally a lot easier to kind of like, okay, one lap at a time, where am I? And he's used to that. He's used to waiting till he hears a bell and then going.
Yeah, I'll say this. If the pack in the championship miles is 3 or 4 runners and Paul Chelimo is one of those runners with about 3 miles to go, I don't think I'm going to leave it to a kick, just given his pedigree on the track. Okay, to wrap up the discussion about Paul, let's assume he finishes. And Johnny, I'll go to you here first. Let's assume he finishes. What does he run for time?
I think he's going to stay up with the top group. I'm going to say 209.
Okay. Not far off what Rory will be helping to pace. And Rory, a question for you that admittedly comes from the backdrop of what Paul has experienced in his career. I don't want to paint this question specifically to Paul, but based on your experience and talking with coaches and other athletes, when an athlete is transitioning from the track to the road, does there, and obviously that typically happens later in someone's career, particularly if they have a lot of success on the track, but does there become a point at time in which that transition happens too late? And perhaps some runners, based on how much tread is left on the tires, just don't have that much more to give once they move up to the 26.2 mile distance?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer, and I think Scott Fauble said this, who will be commentating the race, in his most recent exit interview on the Citius Mag podcast, that he was, he believes that someone should run their best event in their prime. And your prime in the marathon, it is obviously like a different runway than the track. Like you're probably in your peak for the 800, 1500 in your early to mid 20s. Longer the distance gets, they scoot that back just because of the aerobic side versus the power side. And so the marathon is tricky because you see athletes run world records in their mid to late 30s. You see guys winning medals in their mid to late 30s, and Paul's in that range. I don't know exactly how old he is, but I would assume he's in his mid 30s. So in theory, he should be in the tail end of a prime in the marathon world. But yeah, he did have a long, arduous career on the track. So it is one of those things where it's like, how much did that burn? You can only burn so bright so long. And, I don't know what's happening because he's not the kind of guy that I'm not following him on Strava. I don't think he has a Strava. So I can't look at his training and be like, oh, this is what's going on. It's a lot of this happens behind closed doors. So we'd be speculating a lot on what could or could not have happened over the last several years. But talent never goes away. and he's a smooth runner. He's a fast runner. I would assume, if everything else is falling into place, if he's staying healthy, if he's following things well, and he's learning how to fuel for the marathon and able to put in the work, I mean, the pace is going to feel easy. It's just a matter of whether or not he's got the legs to do it for the whole distance.
To your point, I mean, tremendous talent on paper, the most talented runner in the field, even though he hasn't shown that yet at the marathon distance. Without a doubt, he's added a lot of intrigue to this field on the men's side. We'll bounce back to the men's field in a minute, but sticking with how we opened this segment, talking about the top seeds, going over to the women's field now, another top seed whose credentials separate themselves a little bit from the rest of the pack, and that is, of course, Kellen Taylor, who has been one of the most consistent forces at the marathon distance on the American scene for more than a decade now. She's been there or thereabouts in many, many races, world majors included, won Grandma's back in 2018. She's 39 now, but is still at it. Had planned to run New York in November and now has opted for the Marathon Project. Let me open discussion of Kellen with this question. Given her pedigree, given her credentials, Johnny, I'll go to you on this one. Is it an upset if she doesn't win?
Well, interesting. I mean, of course, there's on paper, and you said it yourself, 39 years old, an incredible resume. You start to wonder where that balance starts to tip. I mean, there's no doubt she's going to bring a lot of race smarts, a lot of experience. And at the same time, I mean, I wouldn't call it an upset. I think if she's competing, that's going to be a success. And as you know, any marathon, it's kind of who can reduce the amount of variables that go wrong. But I wouldn't call it an upset. I think it's incredible that she's in this field and she's going to elevate the entire competition on account of it. But I wouldn't peg her as my, all out favorite to win it per se.
Rory, an athlete you know well, former teammate of yours at NAZ Elite. Based on your familiarity with Kellen, what makes her so tough, so consistent? Because when I think about her, that's what I think about Kellen Taylor. She's always sticking her nose in it and usually produces a really stellar result at the marathon distance.
Yeah. For Kellen, one of the toughest athletes I've ever got to witness in person, like from a training standpoint, from a racing standpoint. It's never a question of if she'll perform if she's on the line. It's if she's on the line. When she starts a race, she's good. She's always good. She doesn't have bad results when she's on the starting line in a marathon. It just doesn't happen. And I did look at her Strava because she does have it, and she has been running. And that honestly is all I need to know that she'll be in it to contend to win. Last year, I think she was top 10 at New York for like a third or fourth time in her career. And I know her build wasn't good. I talked to her after the race and she was like, well, just pulled it out. And I feel like that's what she does. If she's on the start line, she's tough as nails. She's just got a lot of experience in lifelong training, and it doesn't take her long to get fit or much to get fit. So she trains really hard when she's training, and when she's training, she's fit. So I know she's been running, so I expect her at a minimum to be in the contention for the win.
She is the top returning athlete in the women's field from the Marathon Project 2020, where, speaking about her toughness and sticking her nose into it, she went with Sarah for much of that race in the early going, ultimately ended up finishing third in 2:25, had a tremendous performance that day. All right, sticking with the women, and I want to throw some statistics out there because I think these help set the stage for what potentially is going to be not just a fast race, but a competitive race. If we break down the top 15 seeds or so on the women's side, you have 5 women who have run sub 2:30 in terms of their PR. So it's Kellen. You have Paige Wood, who is a returner from Marathon Project 2020. Also Molly Graybill, Jane Barakis, and Hannah Lindholm from Sweden. And then you also have 5 runners who have gone sub 2:35 with their PR. And this is Aaliyah Hansen from the U.S., Brittany Smith, also from the U.S., Lainey Marchant from Canada. Rory, you'll know her. Jessica Wachowicz from the U.S., and then also Brianna Bomer. So these are very tightly grouped in terms of their personal records. And if you throw out the fastest PR in the field, and I'll explain why I'm doing that in a minute. But if you throw that out, you have a range of just over 5 minutes from the fastest PR to the slowest PR among those 10. And I'm throwing out Kellen's time from Grandma's in 2018, since that was 7 years ago. Obviously, she's more recently run 225. So what do you make of that? And Rory, I'll start with you in terms of, as Johnny mentioned earlier, everything is optimized for this race to be fast and achieve qualifying times and achieve PRs. But the race within the race to achieve those fast times also could be very competitive because of how tightly grouped these women are.
Yeah, my guess is that we'll have a couple groups form immediately, and then it'll be a matter of, does the front group have what it takes to run the pace that they set out to, which I actually don't know what the lead women are going out at. Maybe you do know that, Steve. But, depending on the aspirations of the front and where people decide to slot in behind, you'll probably have a couple races unfolding together. And then, there's always the risk of someone who gets out over their skis and comes back to the second group. And there's always, the opportunity for someone in the second group to feel really good and have a big negative split. And what I think would happen is, although they'll start in their separate groups, I think that it'll eventually turn into a string of runners that are coming in one at a time. And, it's marathoning, so gaps can be large, but I would expect, people will run lifetime best because the course and conditions will help for that. And people didn't choose this race without thinking about running fast. That's why you choose a marathon project. So I would guess that there's going to be some big swings, and when there's big swings, there's, drama. So I would guess that there will be someone who goes out really hard and wanting to run something really good, and then there's going to be someone who's, maybe I look at the debutantes on the women's side. I know Mika Rivera Wood really well, the Peruvian athlete. She went to my high school. I was the best man at Adam and Mika's wedding, so I know them very well. And I know she's really fit. She's coached by my former college coach. She had a great summer of road racing. This is her first marathon. I think, sky's the limit. I think she definitely wants to break 2:30, but, I look at her talent and I say, it wouldn't be surprised if she runs like 2:26 to 2:28. So there's stuff like that, that makes you go, you never know. And sometimes it's really just who had the best build and who has the best race plan. And that's what's exciting about the marathon is when you show up to a start line, we don't take people's PBs and just start sorting people out. We let them figure it out on the day.
Drama. We'll sign up for that, Rory. We need more drama in the marathon. I love it, and I hope that happens. Johnny, who jumps out at you from the women's field we covered?
Yeah, well, the two that come to mind, Paige Wood. I've watched her race the better part of a decade, and both of us being from the ACC and just following her trajectory now into the longer distances, and obviously a competitor coming back from maternity leave. I'm excited to see how she's continued to progress off that. But one thing I know for sure is she's a competitor, and she's still on kind of the younger end of this development cycle. So, I think we've yet to see the best from her. Gotten to see firsthand some of the training they do with NAZ. So I'm excited to see Paige take the line, and then Micah as well. That debut, Roy, I was going to say that I found it pretty interesting and admirable. Is like on top of it, the way that she can share that story is something unique. Somebody who's in the media, but also coming from an athletic background, how challenging that can be to balance the training and the competitive side. But I think it's amazing how she and Adam have been able to share that story and hopefully bring a bunch of new attention and interest into the event. And so hats off to her, just for balancing both so well. I'm excited for her.
Yeah. And I would think that there's going to be some pretty exciting stuff on that side. Molly Grable, I would also throw in as like a contender to win. Yep. Just because she's run 2:26 and she just ran a pretty good half marathon in the build. I like looking at recent data to show me how someone's competing at the moment. I think, everybody approaches racing within a marathon block differently, but I like when the results look strong on paper, because usually that means that you're in good shape. So she ran, I think, 71 or 72 minutes at Indy, and that would suggest that she's on track for a good race in the marathon project.
Rory, to your point about the pace, so the male pacers for the women's field are going to go out in 2:23. And I find this intriguing. So that is a frothy pace for a group of women, none of which has broken 2:24. Take me into the mindset then. These women, as you mentioned, there are going to be some women out here taking some big swings. By the very definition of the pace here, it's going to be a pretty big swing for the entire field. How do you get your mind wrapped around that to try to maintain and stay with that train? Or do you hang back a little bit knowing that the pace is going to be hot right from the gun? What's the right approach?
Well, you want to have bodies. You don't want to run a marathon alone, even if it is on a looped course and you can see your competitors consistently and you might get a lot of feedback on that course. It's easier to run behind someone than it is to run on your own, mentally, physically, all of the things. There's a physiological difference, and there's more than anything, there's a mental difference of not having to be the one that sets your own pace, but to follow a pacer in a pace group. So, looking at this field, I would be surprised if more than 5 people go with a pace like that. That would be a little surprising to see more than 5 in that group, which means, like I said, there's going to be another group that forms probably pretty naturally behind that will probably be banking on some, damage up front. And, if you can run a little bit more conservative and have your legs at the end and people are coming back to you, that's what the marathon is it's a war of attrition. So if you have your eyes set and you're hunting rather than being hunted, I think you have a good opportunity to move up quickly in the field in the later stages.
Johnny, what's your take on that prescribed 2:23 pace for the women's field?
That's ambitious. That's mighty ambitious. I'd love for somebody to stick with it, but I'm glad they're setting the bar high. But yeah, it's you have to have a really, really good day, I think, to stay on that one.
Yeah, no kidding. I think to Rory's point, some business decisions might have to be made very early on in the race, whether or not you're going to go with that type of pace. All right, let's shift gears now to the men's race. And as we've been talking about, very tightly grouped pack of women, not much in terms of separation of best times. I think the men's field is even more tightly grouped. Only one athlete, Brian Schrader of the U.S., has cracked 2:10. You have 3 guys who have gone sub 2:11, and that's Thomas Broch, Johannes Machman, and J.P. Flavin, representing Canada, Germany, and the U.S. respectively. And then everybody else in the top dozen seeds is either a 2:11 guy or making their debut. So this men's field, doesn't have the same depth, at least on paper, as the 2020 field, but potentially could be even more intriguing just given this mix of runners with several making their debut and the tightly grouped PRs. Johnny, let me start with you on this one. Among those guys, and as you've been taking a look at the men's field, who do you think is best poised to make a breakthrough?
Yeah. I mean, you said it yourself. The amount of debuts here is pretty intriguing. I'm really, that's kind of where I have focused a lot of my attention. That's caught my eye. I'm seeing a lot of names like Dylan Maggard, Nadil Wildschut, people that I know historically, maybe outside of the marathon distance, are incredible athletes. And this being their first time, and like we said, like the nature of this course and the setup of it, I think would lend itself to a breakthrough with somebody who's maybe coming from the track or not accustomed to some of these wild variables at other marathons. I think it's the wild variables at other marathons that can really throw off a debut. But in an environment like this, I think it's a perfect opportunity for a debut.
Yeah, great point for making a debut. There's so much that has to be managed with a marathon, and the Marathon Project helping you control a lot of those variables does maybe take the stress level down just a little bit. Rory, have you been talking to anybody in the men's field as you're getting ready to embark on your pacing duties?
Yeah, actually quite a few. I definitely feel like my intel's a lot better on the men's field than it is the women. Just naturally, when I announced I was pacing, got a lot of people wondering who's going to go with my group, who's going to go with the next group. Here's what I'll say. I've heard and seen Nadil Wildschut around town. He looks fit, seems fit. seems ready. I know he's going with the pace. I'm intrigued by that. Very intrigued. The other debut with a big, track resume, probably the best track resume other than Paul Chelimo, is Thomas Fafard, 5,000 meter Olympian, 13:05 guy. I know his plan is to be a little bit more conservative just because he's a little bit more cautious about the distance, but I do think he's a freak talent and he could do something special. He's a very efficient runner. He's run 62 minutes for the half marathon. So he's taken a few stabs at the half and had success there. And, he's had good training. I know that. We're good buddies. So I think he's going to likely go out a little slower and hope that there's carnage up front. But I think in all likelihood, like the majority of that lead pack that I'll be towing will be guys that have run 210 and 211 that, they've got a laundry list full of reasons why they haven't cracked that 210 barrier, but they're convinced that they're ready for it. I know Nick Hauger is going to be in my group. I would assume JP Flavin will probably be. I talked to Kevin Hansen in Sacramento last week, and he was telling me that JP is going to be a game time decision on my group or the group behind. There's a lot of people like that are on the fence, and I think it's going to depend on the numbers early. I think there's a chance there's a gravitational pull to the lead group if enough people go out with it. I would say, though, if I was a betting man, a debutant won't win the race just because that's just not usually what happens. Even though maybe on paper there's a few debutantes that are very talented, I would bet on someone like Brian Schrader, someone like JP Flavin that has done it over and over again and is waiting for their breakthrough moment. Nick Hauger is obviously another one that's run a couple 211s now. I recently, on my own podcast and on your podcast, you interviewed Johannes Machman, Mojo as we call him.
Yes.
He's a freak talent, and he really did not have the opportunity to run as fast as he could have at Berlin earlier this fall because it was a really, really hot day. I know he's more than adequately prepared for the distance. I know he's not afraid to run 208 pace at all. And I think he's due. He's run 61:03. I think that might be the fastest half marathon PB in the whole field. And with that combined with his experience in the marathon, guys run half a dozen to a dozen marathons, and he's run a lot of them at that like 210 to 212 range. I just think he's due, and someone like that's going to win this race. Someone like that's going to have their breakout moment. And it's going to be exciting. I would expect big PBs from somebody. I think the winner will run at least 208, and it's going to be exciting.
Guys, a couple of other athletes making their debut in the field. Barry Keane from Ireland, Ben Rosa making his debut. He's a U.S. runner. Johnny, I'll go to you on this question. Rory mentioned he doesn't think that a debutant is going to break through and win this race. But if there's anyone who is likely to have a Rupp-like moment, yes, I'm going to age myself. I'm going to go back to 2016 when Galen Rupp in his first marathon won the Olympic trials. I'm not saying anybody in this field has Rupp-like talent. Let's be clear about that. There probably isn't a runner of that caliber here. But among those making their debut, who's most likely to surprise us?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. And I was going to mention about the intel. I mean, we had the opportunity to go shadow Nadeal in Flagstaff, and actually just published a Workout Wednesday with him. And, from what I've heard from our team, he's looking incredibly fit, incredibly smooth and comfortable. And so that maybe recency bias, certainly other folks, maybe if you're a betting person, may have better odds, but I'm liking the deal, especially because we got to see firsthand. And I'd invite you to kind of check out what he was doing in Flagstaff just a couple weeks ago. Seems like he's well positioned to have a really, really great day. So looking forward to seeing him race.
All right, both of you are willing to put down some money. I'll be a betting man if I can use your money later on. Later on when we make our podium picks. All right. One name that we haven't mentioned, and Rory, I want to go to you on this because this is a gentleman you should know pretty well. Thomas Broach, Canadian champion at the marathon distance. What do you think are his chances as he gets ready to toe the line?
Yeah, I wish I knew more about how his training went, because he has been a really solid marathoner, especially on faster courses. His 210 is from Houston. He basically knocked that out of the park. and I think he ran 2:11 at Houston the year before. So he's
Yep.
he's done well on these types of races, and he's one of those guys that, he's your typical runner, engineer brain, just like really loves putting in the work, shows up, quiet profile. So I really don't know what shape he's in, but if I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see him run under 2:10. I don't know if 2:08's in the cards. This guy, I don't know if he broke 30 minutes in the 10K in college. If he did, it wasn't by much. So that's a big jump. But I definitely know that he's built for the marathon, and I think his range of outcomes is a lot tighter than, say, a lot of other people's maybe in this field, just because, again, experience is so important in the marathon, and when you have a really process oriented athlete with the experience and knowing what that latter stage of the race feels like, I just think that their volatility is going to be a lot lower, and that's a very valuable tool when you're thinking about who's going to place high in this race.
Yeah, for sure. One of the intriguing storylines about the men's field, when you survey it, is, and I think I've got the research right on this, there isn't anyone in the field who has won a marathon of significance. Now, back to Thomas Broach for a second. He is the Canadian champion, but he won that Canadian championship in the Toronto Waterfront Marathon that was staged with other international runners in there. Yeah, he broke the tape as a Canadian champion, but overall in the race didn't break the tape. Is there something to be said, and Johnny, I'll start with you, but certainly want Rory's opinion on this as well. Is there something to be said in running around this narrative that we hear in other sports? And that is, you have to kind of figure out how to win. And, what comes to mind for me, big NFL fan, like the Baltimore Ravens, fantastic regular season team, maybe not this year, but usually a fantastic regular season team. Lamar Jackson, this amazing all-world talent, haven't won a playoff game of significance, certainly haven't gotten close to sniffing the Super Bowl. Does that type of dynamic play out here in this race where you have some talent in this field among the men, but do they sort of have to figure out in the latter stages, man, how do I win this race? I've never been in this position before.
I mean, I think it's a given. Yeah, I think knowing how to win and compete is as equally important as the miles you put in to prepare. I mean, you can run as many miles as you want, run all the workouts you want, but that mindset, that inner confidence that comes from the sharpening that winning mentality, I think is the only way to do it. And is going to be incredibly important. So yeah, you can time trial all day, but competition, is equally, if not more, critical.
And Rory, that's one of the elements that I chatted with Johannes about and also JP about, is this is going to be a race in which you are in the spotlight. You are among the favorites. And those two guys, as talented as they are, let's be clear, they don't go to Boston, they don't line up in Berlin or New York as one of the favorites. So those two guys in particular are just really excited about the opportunity to go into a race, not just to run fast, but when they have an opportunity to potentially win. How do they need to adjust their mindset? Let's say we're going to put them in the championship miles, those final 6 miles on this race course on Sunday, and they're in the mix. What's going through their head as they try to figure out on the fly how to win a race or when to make a break to win a race?
First off, I want to address your Baltimore Ravens slander, as I don't know if you knew this, but I'm a diehard Ravens fan. So
I let that go because I remember when we did when we recorded episode 3, you had a Ravens hat on.
Jeez, that hurt, especially after losing to the Steelers on Sunday. But anyways, I'm going to put that aside for a second and answer your question more directly. Winning a marathon is one of my career goals. I've been second in 2 marathons. It's really hard, especially if you're going to go to the big ones, right? Like, it's going to get harder and harder. And that's a career goal of mine, is one day I want to break the tape at a big marathon. It's got to be big enough for it to count. And it's not easy, especially because the marathon is so long. So many things can go wrong, and all it takes is one guy on that day to have a slightly better day than you. Now, if we're going to talk about people in this field that know how to win, I mean, Paul Chelimo's like the clear cut guy that's going to know how to win. Like nothing is going to scare him about anyone else in this race. And he's won big races. So if he's there, like forget his track speed, because I don't really care about your track speed in the last 10K of a marathon. It's all about your legs and your heart and what you got left in them. So I think, if he's, the way I see it is Paul Chelimo's either on the podium and winning, or he's not on the podium at all. Like there's no third place for Paul Chelimo. There's no second place for Paul Chelimo. It's he wins the race or he's off the podium because he wasn't in it to win it. And, guys like Mojo, JP Flavin, I don't really know, what big races they've won before, but there is that element to that. But I also think like more than anything, it's the mindset of like, when you can smell blood, are you the kind of person that goes and takes a risk? And I know both those guys fairly well, but I know Mojo quite a bit better, and I've trained with him, and I do think he's the kind of guy. It's like, nothing to lose here. He's just going to go for it. Brian Schrader would be another guy that we haven't talked about enough because he is, I think the fastest seed time.
He is, yep.
But he won big races in college. He won a few races on the early stages of his road running career. He's always in the mix in U.S. profiled races. So I don't know, like there's definitely levels to the type of races that you're trying to win. And I think it's kind of wide open in that sense. I would definitely, not be surprised if a guy like Brian Schrader is there and winning just because of experience and, pedigree.
All right, gentlemen, you ready to make some podium picks?
Let's do it.
I am.
All right. Let's be chivalrous here. We'll start with the women. And okay. I'll go first, and we'll do it in dramatic fashion because Rory, you're already talking about how there's going to be drama out there on Sunday. So I'm going to go from 3 to 1, and we'll call our podiums this way. So among the women, I'm going to go with Molly Graybill in third. I'm going to go with Kellen Taylor moving up one place from her 2020 finish. She'll finish second. And I'm going to go with, from Hoka NAZ Elite, Paige Wood, to come back. She's familiar with the course. She had a standout performance in 2020. By the way, she ran the fastest U25 time ever at the time in the marathon distance in her debut on that course in 2020. And I'm going to say she's going to break the tape in 2:25:10. That's going to be my winning time. There are my women's predictions. Johnny, I'm going to go to you. Your women's podium.
I like that. Good, solid picks. Like I said, I might go out on a limb here, but I'm going to say Micah Wood is going to get third here and have an amazing debut. That sub 230 is going to put her as one of the top Peruvians of all time. I'd be thrilled about that. I think for second, Molly Gribbles is a solid pick, and then Paige Wood, I agree, is going to be my top pick. She's from the area. She knows Arizona so well. That's I think this is going to be her day, and this is going to be her big moment. So times, I think she will do a PR. I don't know as fast as that, but maybe 2:25:50.
All right. Good calls. Mr. Linkletter, over to you, your ladies' podium.
Yep, I will go same third as Johnny. I got Mika for the last podium spot. I think she'll probably be hunting late and be not in the podium position until very late in the race. I would assume that the pack that goes out at this ambitious 2:23 pace has more than 3 people in it, and that we'll see what happens later. But I will go Mika, Paige, Kellen. So Paige Woods runner up. I'll go Kellen Taylor for the win, and that will round out my podium.
Awesome. Do you have a time? What are you thinking? They going to hit that 2:23?
I think 2:24:57.
To be exact. I love it. 2:24:57. All right. So some commonalities. Both of you very high on Mika Wood in her debut. That would be awesome to see. All right. Well, let's move.
video out of it too.
No doubt. Their stories, Mika and Adam's stories, are very entertaining, no doubt. All right, let's go with the guys. I'll go last on this one, so we'll reverse the order. Rory, you kick it off. Your men's podium for the 2025 Marathon Project.
Okay. So I'm going to stick with what I said about Paul Chelimo. He's either winning the race or he's not on the podium. So I'll let that build some suspense. So in third place, I've got Barry Keane of the Boston Athletic Association, the Irishman. He looked good at Manchester Road Race. I just raced him recently. It seems like his training's gone really well. And I think he's going to try to run a very smart, tactical race. And I think that ends him with a third place finish. I think he'll run very similar to Mika. I don't think he'll go out with the leaders, but I think he'll close well and run a really good race. In second place, I will go with Brian Schrader, the best PB in the field. I think he's going to be right there. I think he's going to run a PB, and I think that'll be close, but no cigar. I've got Mojo, Johannes Machman, the German assassin is what we'll call him, winning the race in 2:07:53.
Woo! 2:07:53. Well, you're somewhat on the hook for that, because that will mean you've done it your job. If you
he's going to have the best pace job he's ever experienced, no doubt about it. I mean, three guys, you got two 2:06 guys pacing it, and a guy that's run 61:30 for a half marathon that's going to be our starter. I think we'll be with them through 20 miles, and I think it'll be right at on the nose 2:08 pace, and then it's just going to be about racing. I do think there will be 3 or 4 guys up there in that group. But yeah, I think it'll late in the race, there will be a pack of 3 to 5 guys in the last 10K, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that's how it plays out. And you talk about some firepower up front in terms of the pace setters to get these guys going. All right, Johnny, you're on the spot here. Men's podium.
Yeah, Roy, I gotta say those are some solid picks. I think I'm gonna deviate a little bit, go out on some limbs here, but I think JP Flavin's gonna be my third place. I've seen him race many times, and I know he's got both the experience and the, I think opportunity to rise to the occasion here. Brian Schrader, like you said, is gonna be my second place. He's also extremely accomplished. And then this is my hope and dream. I think that'd be a really awesome story to have Paul Chelimo on top of that podium in the race. And, like I said, 2:09, it would be an incredible PR. And, but I just think what a delightful story that would be. So I'm rooting for Paul to have his day.
Awesome. So 2:09 and change in the winning time with Paul Chelimo taking gold. All right. Excellent. Well, I'll round us out. I'm going to go with a little bit of a dark horse. You kind of did this as well, Rory, by picking Barry Keane in the third slot. I'm going to go with Dylan Maggart. His training has been going really well based on what he's been posting. He's been logging 130-mile weeks. He feels good about his fitness level. He's been hanging out in Big Bear in an RV, which sounds like that's the way you harden up for a marathon. So a bit of a dark horse. I'm going to go with Dylan Maggart in third. Can't discount the pedigree, and Rory, to your point about the best PR coming in. So I'm going to go with B. Schrade in the second slot, Brian Schrader to take second. And like-minded on this one, Mr. Linkletter, I'm going with Mojo as well. I just came away from the discussion that I had with him. That guy is, to your point, full of run, full of talent, but he feels like he's very confident coming into this race as well, and his buildup has gone really, really well. I'm going to go 2:09:15. So interestingly enough, both Johnny and I a little bit more conservative in terms of what the pace is going to be. We don't have your frothy 2:07:53, I believe you said, but I would love to see it. Don't get me wrong.
I'm going to give you a little history lesson. Go look at the Marathon Project results from 2020 and look at those guys' careers. This is a course where you will run a time that is an outlier from your previous performances. So I'm looking for a guy like Mojo is already due a personal best. Like he's been in personal best form for the last year. He ran a 2:11 for 11th place at the Berlin Marathon, one of the deepest marathons in the world.
Yeah.
And the conditions were horrible. I think he's built on his fitness since then. And I believe he'll probably run 2 to 3 minutes faster at a minimum. So, and I do think that there's going to be a lot of competition bringing out the most in these guys. I wouldn't be surprised if 3 guys break 209, 3 or 4.
I would love to see that. And yeah, to your point about Johannes's performance at Berlin, a better weather day and that 211 is what, maybe high 208, for example. Totally agree.
You didn't ask for it, but I'll give you a bonus pick. Top debut, yes. Nadeal Wildshoot. I'll give him 4th place. He's an honorable mention. I feel like I made a mistake not putting him on my podium, so I want to at least give him an honorable mention and top debut.
You're on the record with that as your 4th place pick. Guys, this was so much fun. I really appreciate you taking the time to chop it up about the Marathon Project. Cannot wait, Rory, to see you leading the train out, and also cannot wait to collaborate, Johnny, with your coworkers at FloTrack as I team up with Molly Seidel and Scott Fauble to bring us all the action from the Arizona desert on FloTrack. If you don't already have this on your calendar, we are going on with our live stream at 9 a.m. Eastern Time on Sunday. Catch all the action on FloTrack. We're going to kick it off with the pre-race show at 9 and then get us right into all the action. And as Rory Linkletter has promised, all the drama as well that is going to take place on the roads of Chandler, Arizona. Gentlemen, thanks again. What a pleasure.
It's fun.
Thank you very much.
We are one race, one project, and one pursuit. I get to say it for the final time before we go live on Sunday. It is the Marathon Project.